The galaxy had forgotten peace. For 300 years, the stars themselves had served as battlegrounds in the endless war between the Claw Empire and the Unity Coalition. Planets burned. Species vanished. Refugees scattered across the void like dust in a storm. Through this chaos moved the cargo vessel Horizon, its hull scarred from near misses and hasty repairs. The ship had once transported luxury goods between wealthy worlds, but now carried something far more precious: survivors. Captain Tom Miller stood on the bridge, his weathered face illuminated by the glow of tactical displays. He was human, one of the few still traveling among the stars. Most had retreated to Earth decades ago, when the conflict began spreading into human space. "Another distress signal, Captain," said Kren, the navigator. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he processed the incoming data. "Mining outpost in the Vega sector. Heavy bombing reported." Miller rubbed his face. "How many?" "They claim 200 survivors, but signal quality is poor." "Any warships in the area?" Kren's fingers danced across his console. "Claw destroyer group detected at the edge of the system. They appear to be moving away." Miller nodded. They had space for maybe 50 more refugees if they converted another cargo bay. Not nearly enough, but they couldn't leave people to die. "Set course. Tell medical to prepare for casualties." The Horizon shuddered as its engines pushed it toward danger once again. The mining outpost on Vega 7 was still burning when they arrived. What had once been a thriving operation with habitation domes and processing facilities was now twisted metal and smoke. The attack had been thorough, a common Claw tactic designed to leave no infrastructure for their enemies. From the shuttle viewport, Miller surveyed the devastation. "Land near that collapsed dome. Looks like some sections might still have atmosphere." His security chief, Lark, checked her weapon. "Time limit, sir." 30 minutes. If Claw forces return, we can't be here." The shuttle touched down on scorched Earth. Miller led the rescue team through the wreckage, their environment suits protecting them from the toxic smoke. They found the survivors huddled in a sealed emergency shelter: miners, technicians, and their families. Many were injured. All were terrified. An older man with burn marks across his face approached Miller. "You're human," he said with surprise. Miller nodded as he helped a child into a rescue stretcher. "We detected your signal. The Claw hit us without warning. No demands, no chance to surrender." The man's voice cracked. "We're just miners. We have nothing they want." "It's not about resources anymore," Miller replied grimly. "This war stopped making sense a long time ago." As they loaded the survivors, only 87 had survived from a colony of nearly 500. Miller's communicator buzzed. Kren's voice came through, tight with urgency. "Captain, we have incoming. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace at the system edge." Miller cursed. "Claw reinforcements?" "Negative. Configuration unknown. They're not broadcasting identification. Get everyone on board now." Miller shouted to his team. "We're leaving." The Horizon broke orbit as the mysterious vessels entered the system. Through the main viewport, Miller watched as 7 ships of unfamiliar design moved with precise formation toward Vega 7. They were sleek, their hulls a dark blue-gray that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Are they pursuing us?" Miller asked. Kren shook his head. "They're ignoring us completely. They've taken up positions around the planet." As the crew watched, the lead vessel broadcast a message, not just to them, but system-wide. "This is Admiral Ward of the Earth Defense Fleet. We have detected war crimes committed in this system. The responsible parties will be identified and held accountable. This slaughter ends today." A stunned silence fell over the bridge. "Earth Defense Fleet," Lark whispered. "Earth has been silent for decades." Miller stared at the ships, recognition slowly dawning in his eyes. "Not just any ships," he said quietly. "Those are Harbingers, the legendary dreadnoughts from the Archive Wars. Ships that were supposedly decommissioned centuries ago." On the screen, More vessels were appearing, dozens, then hundreds, an armada awakening from long slumber. "Captain," came a voice from behind. One of the rescued miners stood at the entrance to the bridge, staring at the display. "What does this mean?" Miller's expression hardened with the first real hope he'd felt in years. "It means humanity has decided to return to the stars." News of the Earth fleet's appearance spread through refugee networks faster than official channels could track. The Horizon, now carrying over 200 survivors from various worlds, had become an unexpected messenger of hope. Captain Miller stood in the ship's crowded mess hall, which had been converted into a makeshift meeting room. Refugees from 6 different species packed the space, their voices creating a constant murmur of excitement and disbelief. "I need verified information," Miller said, addressing the gathered leaders from each refugee group. "Not rumors. What do we actually know about these Earth ships?" Jax, a tall reptilian with iridescent scales, stepped forward. Before the war, he had been a military analyst for the Unity Coalition. They've appeared in 3 more battle zones since Vega 7. Each time, they position themselves between civilian populations and attacking forces. They don't engage unless fired upon, but when they do. He paused. A single Earth vessel disabled an entire Claw battle group without suffering any damage. "Impossible," said Lark from her position by the door. "I saw the footage," Jax insisted. "Their technology is beyond anything the Claw or Unity possess." Miller frowned. Earth had withdrawn from galactic affairs nearly 50 years ago, when the war first threatened human colonies. They had evacuated their people back to the Sol system and activated a massive defensive perimeter. No ships in, no ships out. The rest of the galaxy had been too busy with their own war to care much about a single species going silent. "Why now?" Miller asked, voicing the question everyone was thinking. "Earth has ignored the war for decades." A small, elderly woman pushed through the crowd. Mara was one of the mining colony's administrators, her dark skin now partially covered with bandages from the attack. "Perhaps they needed time," she suggested. "Time to prepare, to build a fleet that could actually end this madness rather than just add to it." Miller considered this. The ships we saw weren't new construction. Those were harbingers, warships from Earth's past conflicts, ships that supposedly were locked away after they nearly destroyed a star system in the Archive Wars. The room fell silent. The Archive Wars were ancient history, fought long before anyone present was born, but the stories remained. Humans had faced extinction and responded with weapons of terrifying power. When the war ended, they had sealed those weapons away, vowing never to use them again. "So what changed?" Lark asked. "Why break that vow now?" "We need to find out," Miller decided. "Set course for the nearest reported Earth fleet location." The Horizon dropped out of hyperspace at the edges of the Talon system, a formerly prosperous trading hub now contested by both Claw and Unity forces. The scene before them was extraordinary. Battles that had raged for months had simply stopped. Warships from both sides maintained position, weapons powered down, as 5 Earth vessels held formation between them. "They're talking," Kren said with astonishment, monitoring communication channels. "Actual diplomatic discussions. I'm picking up negotiation broadcasts." Miller stared at the main viewport, almost unable to believe what he was seeing. "Can we get closer?" "I want to." An alert sounded, cutting him off. "Incoming transmission," Kren reported, "directed specifically at us." The bridge screen activated, showing the face of a human woman with short gray hair and the sharp eyes of someone accustomed to command. "Cargo vessel Horizon, this is Admiral Ward of the Earth Defense Fleet. Your ship has been identified as a humanitarian transport. We request permission to send a representative aboard to speak with your captain." Miller exchanged glances with his officers before responding. "Permission granted, Admiral." 30 minutes later, a small shuttle docked with the Horizon. The man who emerged wore a simple dark blue uniform with minimal insignia, just a silver Earth emblem on his collar. He introduced himself as Commander Ben West. Captain Miller, West said with a formal nod. Earth thanks you for your rescue efforts during this conflict. We've done what we could, Miller replied cautiously. But I think you owe us an explanation. Why has Earth suddenly decided to intervene after all these years? West's expression hardened. It wasn't sudden, Captain. We've been watching, gathering intelligence, building our forces, preparing for the right moment. He handed Miller a small data drive. This contains coordinates and authentication codes. Earth is calling all human ships home and extending sanctuary to any refugees you carry. Home. Miller hadn't set foot on Earth in 20 years. Why? Because the true war hasn't even started yet, West said grimly. What you've witnessed so far is merely the prelude. We need every human ship and every human captain for what comes next. The journey to Earth would take 2 weeks at maximum speed. For Captain Miller, it felt like traveling back in time. He had left Earth as a young man, seeking adventure among the stars. Now he was returning with a ship full of aliens who had never seen humanity's homeworld. Miller studied the data Commander West had provided. The coordinates led to a specific approach vector to the Sol system, one that would bypass the infamous defensive grid that had isolated Earth for decades. Are you sure about this? Lark asked, reviewing the security protocols on her terminal. Earth closed its borders completely. Some say they shot down ships that try to return. We don't have much choice, Miller replied. Our supplies are critically low, and we have wounded who need better care than we can provide. The refugees had mixed reactions to their new destination. Some were excited at the prospect of sanctuary on the legendary human homeworld. Others were suspicious of Earth's sudden reemergence and feared being used as pawns in some larger strategy. Jax, the military analyst, spent hours in the cargo bay, converted into a makeshift gym, practicing combat forms with precise movements. Preparing for something? Miller asked, finding him there late in the ship's night cycle. Jax paused, his scaled skin glistening with exertion. Humans have a saying, don't they? There's no such thing as a free meal. Miller nodded. You think Earth's invitation is a trap? I think nothing in this war happens without purpose. Jax resumed his exercises. The Earth fleet appears after 50 years of silence. They halt battles with technology we can barely comprehend. Then they invite refugees to their homeworld. Why? It was the question that kept Miller awake at night. On the 10th day of their journey, the horizon's sensors detected another ship following the same course. Then another. By the next day, they were part of a convoy, dozens of vessels of various designs, all headed toward Earth. Most are refugee ships like us, Kren reported, but some are former military. I'm detecting at least 3 converted Unity corvettes and what appears to be a Claw scout ship. Miller frowned. Contact them. I want to know who's commanding these vessels. The communications revealed a pattern. Every ship had received the same invitation from Earth. Many were captained by humans who had left Earth years ago. Others had human crew members or had rescued humans during the war. As they approached the outer boundary of the Sol system, the convoy was met by 2 Harbinger-class warships that took up escort positions. Attention all vessels, came the transmission. Follow our lead precisely. Deviation from the designated flight path will be considered hostile action. The ships entered the system in tight formation, passing through gaps in defensive arrays that shifted position to allow them through. Gaps that would be impossible to find without insider knowledge. And then, after passing the orbit of Neptune, they saw it. Earth, blue and green and white, surrounded by orbital stations and defense platforms that glittered like jewels against the blackness of space. It's beautiful, whispered Mara, who had joined Miller on the bridge. I never thought I'd see it. Incoming transmission, Kren announced. From Earth Central Command. The main screen activated, showing an older man with a stern face and the insignia of a fleet admiral. Welcome home, travelers, he said. I am Admiral James Turner, Earth Defense Force. All ships will proceed to the coordinates being transmitted for docking and processing. Medical teams are standing by for any wounded. Miller stepped forward. "Admiral, I'm Captain Tom Miller of the Horizon. We appreciate the sanctuary, but my passengers have questions about Earth's sudden return to galactic affairs." The Admiral's expression remained neutral. "All will be explained once you're planetside, Captain." He hesitated, then added, "What you and the other ships have witnessed is only the beginning. Earth has remained silent not from fear or indifference, but because we discovered something far worse than this war." "Worse?" Miller echoed. "What could be worse than the destruction we've already seen?" "The reason behind it," Turner replied gravely. "This conflict was engineered, Captain. The Claw and Unity didn't start fighting on their own. They were manipulated by something that's been hiding in the shadows for centuries." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. As the Horizon approached its assigned docking station, Miller looked down at Earth, the home he'd almost forgotten, and wondered what terrible secret had finally brought humanity back to war. The processing center on Earth's largest orbital station was overwhelming. Thousands of refugees from dozens of species moved through medical checkpoints and registration areas. Human officials in blue uniforms worked efficiently, cataloging each arrival and addressing immediate needs. Miller watched as his passengers were provided with food, medical care, and temporary quarters. Despite his suspicions, he had to admit that Earth was honoring its promise of sanctuary. "Captain Miller." A young woman in a military uniform approached. "I'm Lieutenant Parker. Admiral Turner has requested your presence at command headquarters. If you'll follow me." Miller glanced at Lark. "Watch over our people. I'll be back as soon as I can." The shuttle ride to Earth's surface was surprisingly brief. Miller pressed his face to the viewport, taking in the sight of vast cities protected by energy shields that shimmered in the sunlight. Outside the cities, much of the land appeared to be untouched wilderness. "Earth looks peaceful," Miller remarked. Lieutenant Parker nodded. "We've had 50 years to rebuild and prepare." "Prepare for what exactly?" She remained silent for the rest of the journey. Command headquarters was built into the side of a mountain, its entrance a massive set of steel doors that opened as their shuttle approached. Inside, Miller was led through security checkpoints to a large circular room where a dozen people were gathered around a holographic display. Admiral Turner broke away from the group when Miller entered. "Captain, thank you for coming." He gestured to the others. "These are the leaders of Earth's defense initiative. For the past 5 decades, they'd been working to uncover the truth about this war." Turner activated a control panel, and a holographic display changed to show a star map of the galaxy. Red lines traced the expansion of the conflict from its origin point. The war between the Claw Empire and the Unity Coalition began with a simple border dispute, Turner explained. But our analysis showed something unusual. The escalation pattern was too perfect, too calculated. Each time peace seemed possible, a new atrocity would occur, often appearing to be committed by one side, but actually engineered by a third party. Miller studied the display. "You're saying someone wanted this war to happen?" "Not someone," Turner corrected. "Something. We call them the architects." The display shifted to show grainy footage of a strange vessel unlike any Miller had seen before. Its structure seemed to bend light around it, making it difficult to focus on. "We first detected them 20 years ago, observing battles from the edges of affected systems. When we tried to make contact, they vanished. But our long-range sensors kept finding them, always watching, sometimes interfering in small but critical ways." An older woman stepped forward. Her uniform bore the insignia of Earth's Science Division. "We believe they're not from our galaxy, Captain. Their technology follows principles we've never encountered before. And they seem to be studying the war." Miller felt a chill. "Like an experiment." Turner nodded grimly. "Exactly like an experiment. They'd been manipulating both sides, keeping the conflict balanced so it continues as long as possible, maximizing destruction and suffering." "But why?" Miller asked. "What could they possibly gain?" "Information," the scientist replied. We believe they're gathering data on how different species respond to prolonged conflict, our breaking points, adaptation strategies, survival rates. It's like watching ants in a farm, but on a galactic scale. Miller struggled to process this. If what you're saying is true, why didn't Earth warn the rest of the galaxy? We tried, Turner said. When we first discovered the pattern, we sent diplomatic missions to both the Claw and Unity leadership. Both ships disappeared. Later attempts met with accidents or were dismissed as human propaganda. His expression hardened. So we withdrew, built up our defenses, reactivated our old warships, prepared to strike not at the puppets, but at the puppet masters. The display changed again, showing the locations of Earth fleet deployments throughout the galaxy. The recent interventions aren't just to stop the fighting, Turner explained. They're to draw out the architects. Every time we interrupt their experiment, they have to adjust, and every adjustment makes them more visible to our sensors. Miller looked around the room at the determined faces of Earth's leadership. So what happens when you find them? Admiral Turner's eyes were cold. We end them. Permanently. Humanity learned its lesson about building weapons of mass destruction. Now we'll use them for their intended purpose. He placed a hand on Miller's shoulder. That's why we called our people home, Captain. Because the real war, the one that matters, is about to begin. 3 days after his meeting at command headquarters, Miller found himself in an underground chamber unlike anything he had ever seen. The room stretched nearly a kilometer in length, its walls lined with screens displaying tactical information from across the galaxy. At the center stood a massive holographic projection of known space, with red markers indicating ongoing conflicts. This is our war room, explained Admiral Turner as he led Miller through security checkpoints. From here, we coordinate all Earth fleet operations. Miller noticed hundreds of humans working at stations throughout the room. Some wore military uniforms, others civilian clothes. All moved with purpose and urgency. You've been planning this for decades, Miller observed. Turner nodded. Ever since we confirmed the architect's existence. But we need more than just our own forces. We need every experienced ship captain we can find, especially those who've survived on the front lines. Now Miller understood why he had been brought here. You want me to join your fleet. Not just join it, Turner replied. We want you to lead a special task force. Your experience with rescue operations gives you insight into the war's impact that our Earthbound commanders lack. They stopped at a raised platform where a group of officers were reviewing battle footage. Miller recognized the strange, light-bending vessels he had been shown earlier, the architect's ships, observing a battle from a distance. We've identified 13 of their observation vessels so far, Turner said, but we believe their main fleet is hidden somewhere in the void sector. Miller knew the region well. A massive area of space with unusual radiation patterns that interfered with most scanning technology. Ships avoided it when possible, but refugees sometimes hid there when desperate. You expect me to take a fleet into the void? Miller asked. Not immediately. Turner gestured to a woman standing nearby. Commander Reed has a more specific mission in mind. Commander Reed was younger than most of the senior staff, with sharp eyes and the focused demeanor of a tactical specialist. Captain Miller, your ship rescued survivors from mining colonies, correct? Multiple colonies, yes. Did you ever encounter void sector refugees, specifically anyone who might have seen unusual activity deep in the radiation fields? Miller thought for a moment. There was one group, miners who had been working an asteroid field at the void's edge. They reported seeing lights deeper in the sector, patterns too regular to be natural. Reed nodded, unsurprised. We believe the architects have a forward base in the void. From there, they monitor and adjust the war to maintain their experiment. We need to find it. Why me? Why not send your warships? The harbingers are too obvious, Turner explained. The architects would detect them immediately and relocate. We need someone who can approach under the guise of a refugee transport, someone they won't see as a threat. Miller understood the logic but still hesitated. My ship's primary mission has been saving lives, not taking them. And how many more lives will be lost if this war continues? Reed challenged. Every day, thousands die in battles orchestrated by beings who see them as nothing more than data points. The architects have been running their experiment for centuries. We're just the current subjects. Turner's expression softened slightly. We're not asking you to abandon your humanitarian mission, Captain. Your ship would still carry refugees, real ones who need evacuation from the void's edge. But you'd also be our eyes, looking for the architect's base. Miller walked to the holographic display, studying the vast expanse of the void sector. And if I find it, you signal us. Then get your people to safety, Reed said firmly. The battle fleet will handle the rest. I need to discuss this with my crew, Miller said finally. They've followed me through hell already. I won't commit them to this without their consent. Turner nodded. Of course. But remember, Captain, this may be our only chance to end the war permanently. Not just create another temporary ceasefire that the architects will eventually break. As Miller turned to leave, an alarm sounded throughout the chamber. Officers rushed to their stations as the main display shifted to show a distant star system. What's happening? Miller asked. Reed's face had gone pale. One of our fleets just engaged an architect vessel. They'd dropped their camouflage. On the screen, a ship unlike anything Miller had ever seen emerged from invisibility. Its surface rippled like liquid metal as it fired weapons that cut through Earth's defenses with terrifying ease. They're not just observers, Turner whispered. They're warriors. Miller watched the battle unfold, knowing his decision had just become much more urgent. The horizon no longer resembled a simple cargo vessel. Earth engineers had worked day and night for a week, reinforcing its hull with advanced materials and installing military-grade shields disguised as standard radiation protection. Weapon systems were hidden within what appeared to be cargo handling equipment. To casual observers, it still looked like a refugee ship, exactly as planned. Miller stood on the bridge, watching his mixed crew prepare for departure. He had given them all the choice to stay behind on Earth, but not one had accepted. Final systems check complete, reported Kren from the navigation station. All modifications are functioning within parameters. Lark approached with a data pad. The refugee manifest is confirmed. 37 civilians from the void border settlements, all with legitimate reasons to be traveling through the sector. Among those refugees were 5 Earth intelligence officers with specialized training in detecting architect technology. They would pose as ordinary survivors, helping to scan for any sign of the hidden base. What about our new additions? Miller asked. Ready in the cargo bay, Lark replied with a slight smile. Though they're not happy about the accommodations. The additions were 6 Void Runners, small, highly maneuverable scout ships designed to operate in the radiation fields of the void sector. If they found anything, these ships would be essential for close reconnaissance. Miller's communicator beeped. Captain, this is Admiral Turner. We've just received reports of another architect attack. A Unity outpost near the void border has been completely destroyed. Survivors? None. They're escalating, Captain. We believe they know we've identified them, and they're moving to a more aggressive phase of their operation. Miller took a deep breath. We're ready to launch, Admiral. Good hunting, Captain. Earth is counting on you. As the horizon pulled away from the orbital dock, Miller took one last look at Earth. He had spent only a week on his ancestral homeworld, but it had been enough to remind him what humanity was fighting for. Not just their own survival, but the right of all species to exist without being pawns in some cosmic experiment. The journey to the void sector took 3 days. As they approached the border, the ship's sensors began to register increasing radiation levels. Strange lights danced across the viewports, the natural phenomenon that gave the void its name. Radiation shields at maximum, Kren announced. Navigation systems compensating for interference. Miller studied the tactical display. Any sign of pursuit or observation? Nothing definitive, Lark replied. Though sensor reliability drops by 40% once we cross the border. Miller nodded. It was why the architects had likely chosen this region for their base. The natural conditions provided perfect cover. Take us in, slow approach. Maintain refugee vessel protocols. The horizon crossed into the void, and immediately the ship's systems began to struggle against the interference. Lights flickered briefly before backup systems engage. Captain, I'm detecting debris field ahead, Kren reported. Appears to be from multiple vessels, some quite recent. Miller frowned. Other refugees. Composition suggests both civilian and military craft. Claw and Unity designs, primarily. They approached the debris field cautiously. Bodies drifted among twisted metal. Evidence of a massacre rather than a battle. Many of the ships appeared to have been attempting to flee deeper into the void when they were destroyed. They were running from something, Lark observed quietly. Miller studied the damage patterns. Not Claw or Unity weapons. These cuts are too clean. He remembered the footage he had seen in Earth's war room, the architect vessel slicing through defenses like they were paper. Sir, called one of the sensor operators, I'm detecting an energy signature deeper in the void. It's faint but consistent with Earth's predictions for architect technology. Miller made his decision. Maintain course as if we're just another refugee ship passing through. Deploy a void runner under radiation cover. Let's see what we're dealing with. The smallest of the scout ships detached silently from the horizon's underside, its systems masked by the surrounding radiation. Its pilot, a veteran of illegal salvage operations in the void, guided it expertly through the interference toward the energy signature. Hours passed in tense silence before the void runner's transmission finally came through, breaking up from radiation interference. Captain, you need. See this. The video feed showed a massive structure floating in the darkness of the void, a station of impossible geometry that seemed to shift and change even as they watched. Around it orbited dozens of the strange vessels they now knew belonged to the architects. It's not just a base, Miller whispered. It's a staging area. They're preparing for war. He turned to his communications officer. Send the location to Earth Command, encrypted channel. Tell them we found the heart of the darkness. The message to Earth went out, encrypted and hidden within normal radiation bursts from the void. Then the horizon waited, maintaining its disguise as a simple refugee vessel seeking passage through the dangerous sector. How long until the fleet arrives? Lark asked, her voice low as they stood on the observation deck, watching the distant lights of the architect base. At least 12 hours, Miller replied, if they received our transmission at all. The void's interference made communication unreliable. Their message might never reach Earth, or it might already have been detected by the architects. Either way, the horizon was alone for now, a small ship facing an enemy of unimaginable power. Miller had ordered the ship to drift with minimal power, appearing disabled to any watching eyes. The refugees, both real and the undercover intelligence officers, had been moved to the most protected inner sections of the vessel. Captain, Kren's voice came through the communicator. We're detecting movement from the architect base, multiple vessels leaving formation. Miller rushed back to the bridge. On the main display, he could see 5 of the strange, shifting ships breaking away from the station and forming a search pattern. They're looking for something, Jax observed. He had joined the bridge crew, his military experience proving valuable. Perhaps they detected our scout ship after all. Power down all non-essential systems, Miller ordered. Emergency protocols only. The bridge darkened as the ship went into low-energy mode. For several tense minutes, the crew watched as the architect vessels swept the area, their sensors probing the radiation fields. One of them changed course, heading directly toward the horizon. They'd found us, Lark whispered. Miller's mind raced. They couldn't outrun the architect ships, and they couldn't fight them with their limited weapons. But perhaps they could still complete their mission. Prepare all void runners for immediate launch, he commanded. Upload all our sensor data and coordinates to each ship. Sir, Kren looked confused. If we can't get the message to Earth, maybe one of the runners can. They're smaller, faster, harder to detect. Miller turned to Jax. I need volunteers to pilot them. Jax stood straighter. I will take one. 4 other crew members stepped forward without hesitation. As the volunteers rushed to the launch bay, Miller faced the remaining crew. The rest of us have a different job. We need to draw the architect's attention, be the target they can't ignore. Lark understood immediately. A decoy. Miller nodded. Exactly. We'll make them think we're trying to escape. Use full power, erratic course changes, everything that makes us look like panicked refugees. It was a desperate plan with little chance of success, but it was all they had. The Void Runners launched silently, each taking a different escape vector, while the Horizon suddenly powered up its engines and made a dramatic turn away from the approaching Architect vessel. The reaction was immediate. The Architect ship accelerated, closing the distance with frightening speed. They've taken the bait, Kren reported. All 5 enemy vessels are now pursuing us. Miller watched the tactical display, tracking the tiny signatures of the Void Runners as they disappeared into the radiation fields. At least some of them might make it through with the vital information. How long can we stay ahead of them? At current speeds, perhaps 20 minutes, Kren replied. It would have to be enough. The Horizon pushed its engines beyond safety limits, weaving through debris fields and radiation pockets in a desperate bid for time. The Architect vessels followed, inexorable and precise. When the first energy beam struck the ship's shields, the impact sent crew members sprawling across the bridge. Shields at 60%. Lark shouted over the alarms. Miller gripped his command chair. Keep going. Every minute we buy counts. A second hit, then a third. Systems failed across the ship as the Architects systematically disabled their prey. Miller was about to order the crew to evacuation pods when Kren suddenly straightened at his console. Captain, massive hyperspace signatures detected. Multiple ships dropping into real space. The main viewport filled with light as dozens, then hundreds, of vessels appeared at the edge of the void. The Earth fleet had arrived, led by the massive silhouettes of awakened Harbinger dreadnoughts. They got our message, Miller breathed. The Architect vessels broke off their attack on the Horizon, turning to face this new threat. But they were too few against too many. The Earth fleet moved with precise coordination, their weapons targeting the Architect ships with devastating effect. The strange vessels fought back fiercely, but they were overwhelmed by the sheer number of human warships. From the damaged bridge of the Horizon, Miller watched as a second wave of Earth ships bypassed the battle, heading straight for the Architect base. Among them were vessels he recognized, ships that had once carried refugees like his own, now armed and ready for war. Admiral Turner's voice came through on an open channel, broadcasting to all ships in the sector. For too long, we watched as our galaxy burned. For too long, we grieved for worlds we could not save. No more. Today, humanity returns not as observers but as protectors. Today, the long silence ends with a roar that will echo across the stars. The Earth fleet surged forward, thousands of weapons firing in unison against the Architects of so much suffering. And Miller knew, as he watched the battle unfold, that the galaxy would never be the same again.